I'm in Bangladesh since early 17, but GIZ is active in the ready-made garment industry since more than 10 years. So if I present my learnings, then I must say we have 4 learnings. I want to focus them on 4. So one thing is that we had a lot of projects on factory level. And of course, we have a saying in the development cooperation, which is pilots never fail, but also never scale. That's a little bit of self-criticism, I must admit, but the question is how to scale up. I think this is one of the big challenges. The second learning is that the knowledge for a clean and fair production is available. Also there, the question is what triggers the upscaling. Number 3 is that we see a low capacity of civil society and unions, and as a result, a limited contribution in social dialogue and in bringing up the industry in terms of performance and productivity. Because social relations, that's my conviction, is a precondition for better performance. And last but not least, we see that governments and associations as well call for support to initiate reforms and innovation. All this in background with government structures and institutions which need to be enhanced to complete the shift to a more sustainable textile and garment sector. We saw a lot of, I'm missing the English word. In German we say Ersatzvornahme. It was a substitute activity of lack of governmental enforcement, like Accord and Alliance. So there is a need for the local authorities to take the law enforcement and control on a way to a more sustainable textile and garment industry in their own hands. And with related to the first remark, factory level, pilots never fail. We need a stronger focus on cooperation, more from a micro level to meso and macro level, especially when we are discussing aspects like level playing field. Of course, micro level is the weakest, and this interconnection of different levels, also at both ends of the value chain, from our perspective, is a very important one. So therefore, the cooperation in the textile and garment sector in Bangladesh aims to accompany the structural change in Bangladesh's textile and garment sector towards a more sustainable industry using production practices that are in line with human rights, labor rights, and minimum ecological standards. This leads to 5 fields of action, which I call governance, workers' empowerment, occupational health and safety, cleaner production, and education and training. So to come back to governance, this area is focusing to strengthen the regulatory framework on the one hand, and on the other hand, strengthening the governmental structures and capacities to enforce laws and regulations. There is, after the out-phasing of Accord and Alliance, this new initiative from the private sector, the RSC in Bangladesh. So it's the private sector self-monitoring approach, which of course has to be in balance with governmental law enforcement. So there we see a good opportunity to bring in our cooperation to balance these two approaches from the private sector and from the government. The second area, workers' empowerment, probably sounds a little bit conflictory, but of course it's always a kind of empowerment in terms of bringing the industry to the next level. So this includes legal counseling to inform workers about rights, but in the same time obligations. This is an approach to avoid violence, to foster social dialogue, and the third area is to establish and support the introduction of an accident insurance system for workers. When it comes to the third area of action field, occupational health and safety, we are supporting any kind of occupational safety and health trainings on factory level. And an additional measure is an activity which is related to rapid response of firefighting in industrial clusters, especially with this high density of factories in Dhaka and Chittagong, blended with housing areas and retail, creates very narrow or very critical access to factories. So the regular firefighters very often reach where fire accidents too late, and with so-called mini fire stations, we were very successful. These mini fire stations perform on how should I say, global level, response times below 8 minutes, and this is an extremely good performance, but with the intention to lower the risk for workers, but also communities are profiting. Fourth action field, cleaner production. I think the Rana Plaza disaster attracted a lot of attention on the social side of sustainable production. Environmental protection was a little bit outside the radar, but since the ready-made garment industry is one of the strongest user of water, but even more in used water, producing used water. I think it's almost 40% of the spoiled water is coming from the garment industry. There is a huge potential for improvement, and we will enforce our activities, which were in the past almost 80% on social. We will bring this in a balance. 50-50 of our budgets will be spent on social and environmental protection equally. And the fifth action field, education and training, aims in improving education on university level as well as on institute level. So we are trying to improve the knowledge of students and managers in terms of sustainable production. So if I put this in the context of the Bangladesh aims of the government, which is to become a middle-income country until 2024, we see a strong dependency of the success story, the textile success story of Bangladesh, related to the everything but arms tax advantages in the export markets. And with the status of a middle-income country, of course, there are stricter rules under the GSP Plus regime. And therefore, we see a strong need to give support to the industry to achieve this level and to maintain in receiving these advantages. So the main problem from our perspective is the compliance with labor law and environmental standards not being enforced sufficiently, and this might lead to conflicts, of course, with the population and in the industry itself. But as I said before, especially with tax advantages, and finally the competitive advantage of Bangladesh in this global competition, which is still price. And the reasons for this challenge of being more compliant, we see in partly a weak regulatory framework in the country, a lack of capacity of government, as mentioned already, limited technical and processual capacities, especially when it comes to treatment of effluent. And this in line with an insufficient awareness about the opportunities and threats of, in brackets, non-compliance. I think this permanent pressure on cost and price is taking away awareness of the opportunities which lie in compliance. The direct link to GSP sooner or later will make it clear, but then it's probably already a little bit late.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Thank you very much for your elaborate pointing out the points that GIZ is doing in Bangladesh. I mean, we'd like to know about in detail, and also very happy to know that German government is enforcing a law that is going to force even more sustainable production in the supply chain in the future. So what we would do now is discuss few points with the panelists also, and get into a question answer session kind of a thing. And I'll bring in our moderator Arindam Saha, who is associate director in PwC. He's going to take over the discussion and moderate it.
Thank you, Deepada, for your introduction. Let me start with Abhishek. Abhishek is the head of sustainability in Arvind Limited, one of the leading textile and apparel manufacturer of India. So Abhishek, if I come to you, we are discussing about this sustainable manufacturing for a long time now. But many of the industry players, they mention that, while the brands take the final sourcing decision, it finally boils down to price. So I'd like to understand from you, how important is sustainability in real business life for understanding or rather creating the competitiveness for the textile manufacturing company in this part of the world?
Certainly. Thanks, Arindam, and good evening, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. So, yeah, Arindam, I think sustainability especially from urban viewpoint and how we look at things, we have three buckets for classifying different kind of sustainability measures. And first and foremost, which is like a easy pass-through or easy approval system, is the projects that lead to direct or indirect saving in the resources or in the cost. So anything related to efficiency improvement or resource saving or better utilization or waste recycling, these are all the measures which are cost positive. And of course, the payback period ranges from 2 years and goes up to like 10, 11, 12 years. So that's another consideration. But some of these projects are easier to do, and I think in spreading this more widely across the industry, key challenge, as Werner also pointed out, is the technical capacity within the industry. So there are organizations who have built technical capacity and are able to do it, but some organizations are not able to do it, and there are programs like PACT or Clean by Design or Apparel Impact Institute who are helping to bring everybody to the same level. Second aspect is or bucket is the projects which are which are cost neutral or cost or very long payback, but they have extremely high upfront investment. So initiatives like renewable energy, which requires significant investment, and although now the cost of generation per se has come down much lower as compared to the grid or other power. So some of these measures we see industries are able to take, and especially people, those who have long-term view, who have been in the business for decades and have or expect and are expecting to continue, because these are measures which pay off over 10, 15, 20 years and require higher amount of investment. So there are initiatives and supports available where you can leverage external finance. And then, of course, there's the most difficult bucket, which is initiatives like wastewater recycling, which would increase the cost of delivery of water to the textile unit. And I think not because of any other reason, but because water is mispriced in our geography. So we have water available at a much lower cost in South Asian region than what it should be to promote recycling. So those are the initiatives which are most difficult to undertake because they require investment. There's no real payback, and they increase your cost of operations significantly. So these are only possible in cases where one has deep understanding of your environmental impact, as well as the feasibility or the risk of running out of business because of water being not available, or due to its diversion from community or your license to operate being taken away. So that's why we see probably less and less prevalence of water recycling, and it has been happening mostly through regulation in some states in India. So, I think that's how you see also penetration of these initiatives. Energy efficiency is becoming popular as the cost of energy rises. Renewable energy is somewhat popular. Water recycling is least popular. And that's also true for some of the labor-related interventions or say safety-related interventions. Although the way we calculate it does pay off in terms of employee retention, their happiness, and disruption of operations due to any safety incidents could be much more costlier and riskier. But not everybody is able to look at it like that.
Mr. Falk, he is the managing director of Plami Fashion. Many of your friends in the industry, they believe that it is not possible at all to do a profitable business, maintaining all the sustainability norms. So I would like to get your comments on that.
The question looks very valid because you know that when you talk about the buyer's price, they're never ready to pay any single cent more. That is their attitude. Okay, oh fine, you did a fantastic job. We like this factory. It is like a resort and all these things. Oh, they just appraise for 15 minutes. But when the price comes, oh, you know that our ultimate buyer is not ready to pay more, and you have to compete with others. This is a market of competition. Blah blah blah. You know, all you know that's but still, I personally believe that still we can get the better money from the buyers, and because no buyer, even when I buy yarn, I buy chemical, I try to buy as cheap as possible. This is the simple buyer mentality, and this is normally it happens always. But when you can also offer the better service together with, let's say you have a 5-star hotel, but the room is smelly, nobody will go there. No, you have to have the 5-star service as well. No, only the 5-star hotel is not enough. So what I believe that if we can cater the service properly, if we can offer the top quality, if we offer them timely shipment, as that's say #1 factory in the world, and service as well #1. So then you can get money. You can get money out of their pocket, but it is not easy. It is not that they come and say, okay, Mr. Hawk, I'm giving you 10 cents more. I have to fight with them. I have to convince. And you know, the big advantage is that when I have the plenty of buyers under my belt, no, and not plenty, that little more than what I actually required, then my negotiation power also become a bit higher. So when I have this from my 5 years experience, I can tell that, okay, it is partially true. It is very difficult to make your business profitable because like us, everybody just thought like this, that, okay, buyers will just jump on the factories and they will start to pay more. That did not happen, to be very honest. Actually, we also thought like that, and that did not happen. And we need 1.5 years to understand it properly. That, okay, no, that is not going to be happen. Because you know, that's when we just about to start the factory, I made an advanced marketing, and I got a response like, no, tremendous response. Okay, let us know when you will start. Let us know when you will start. Don't forget to inform us. No, but when we start, that nobody. Okay, you do work, then okay, we'll come. These are the reality. So the question, my answer is a little bit mixed, and I believe that okay, still we can, and we are surviving for last 6-7 years, and okay, we are not making money what actually we thought. That should be very honest, but obviously it is giving us an opportunity to make a little better money than many others. But question is that whether this is sustainable or not, because we have to invest much more than a normal factory.
I personally is very much impressed with many of the innovative, I will say, ideas which you have implemented in your factory. I got a chance to discuss with you many of those in a few months back. So I would request you to share some of those with the panel, and finally it will go to the industry, because all such activity doesn't always need huge amount of money. So can you please share with us some of the innovative ideas which has worked like a wonder?
No, you see, there are a few very simple. I shared this story that whenever we go to a basin and just wash our hand and face, and nobody actually cares how much water we just wasting, because you see that a very efficient tap, and normally we like to have a tap which gives you very good amount of water. That's everybody likes that, and you'll be surprised to know that a efficient tap gives you 7 to 8 liter water per minute. So if you see, even a male normally takes 1 and 2 minutes to finish their hand washing, face washing. Women maybe even need a little more. So even 2 minutes, that means 16 liters of water. But you know, if I give you 1 bottle of water, 1 liter bottle of water, and there is no water, you will be more than happy to use this one liter water to wash your face and hand. So that's the way we are wasting tons of water only for washing our hand and face only. And as per United States Energy Act, that we are not allowed to use any sorts of water tap which gives more than 1.5 liter water per minute. And exactly, you don't need 1.5 liter, more than 1.5 liter of water per minute. That's enough, should be enough. And I can tell you, when we just shared our experience when we went to buy this special tap, this small amount of water, the shopkeepers were, and he was telling, we never had this kind of request in our life, that people are asking that give us the tap which gives a less amount of water. And we could not find it out because it was initial, and we had to buy this water tap special or under a special order from Singapore. So this is one. And another thing is that very innovative idea, and it was required by the USGBC when you go for the platinum, because platinum, that's not only you have to score a 80, not only you have to score 80, but you have to fulfill another 7 precondition, that then only you can get the and out of the 7 preconditions, there is one thing, that you have to have enough bicycle stand and encourage your workers to use bicycle. Not necessarily that you have to provide them bicycle, but you have to have a bicycle stand. And then very interesting and very encouraging for the workers as well, that those who will use the bicycle, they should be allowed to go for shower before joining the work if they want. And we have to have shower facility for the workers in our factory.
Thank you very much for sharing those ideas. And as I said, that everything doesn't need a lot of money. So with that, let me also request Deepada, why don't you, Deepada, take some of the questions from your side?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. And I'm very happy to hear Mr. Hawk's initiative at Plummy Fashion. It's really encouraging. So with that, I would like to go to Mr. Ulhas Nimkar sir. He is a very experienced man in the chemical management part of the sustainability business. So I would like to understand from him. So chemical management is a very important aspect of sustainability in these days. Now, as we reboot the textile and apparel supply chain, how this chemical management is going to help achieve the sustainable goals? Could you please elaborate on this?
In order to understand the exact situation, let's go back a little bit. All these things really started about 25 years ago, really, when we realized that there, along with all the benefits of chemistry, there were also some hazards related to health and environment. So these were two things which started in the early 90s, really. And that's when the first legislation started coming, mostly from Germany, based on the experience of workers who worked in the factories and the dye manufacturers and users and so on. And as we come along in the next 10, 15 years, slowly things started becoming stricter. They started realizing that many chemicals need to be abandoned or controlled. Then we come to just 10 years ago. And that's when we had the huge, big impact where there was a demand for zero discharge of hazardous chemicals. And that brought about a completely still new change. And one of the key things that happened over here was the concept of chemical management. The idea in chemical management is not to look at the end of the pipeline, as we did prior to that, but to try and look at the input. So the logic was that if we have a clean input coming into the factory, we will have a clean output going out of the factory. So the whole focus changed into clean input. Now with this concept, we have a number of tools that have come up in the past years. and different companies around the world are using these different tools, and quite effectively. There are also a lot of softwares which help you map all these criteria. But what has happened now, that the whole world has gone in a standstill for some time. So it's as if we have an opportunity to reboot the system. In many cases, they are having a fresh inventory. In many cases, the old chemicals have expired, and they're making a clean beginning. So the logic is that everything is already in place. Many of the companies have their ideas, their strategies in place. This is the time when they are starting afresh. And if they start clean, probably this will take them a long way. And I think it's very clear that sustainability is going to be even more important in the post-pandemic days. And I think those companies that give adequate importance to this subject are really going to be the winners going ahead. I think this is where I think that, as we reboot the industry in a way, we have to really keep all these thoughts in mind as we progress.
Okay, so that's a very important side of this chemical management thing. But as we have learned that, I know Mr. Warner has said, even Mr. Hawk has mentioned that the cost of production goes up when you do all those things, all those sustainable practices. But do chemical management also increase the production cost, and what's the business case here? I mean,
so if you see, if chemical management is actually implemented in an effective way, properly, it should be on the contrary. It should help you save money. It should not increase the cost. Why? Because you will have a much better controlled inventory. Many cases today, the mills have duplicate chemicals. With good chemical management, this duplication is avoided. There is less wastage. With the good philosophy of first in, first out, you have got better mapping, better utilization. You have less expired chemicals. Many times the mills don't even know things are lying. There's a drum at the back somewhere which was never accounted for. It's just scrapped because it's lost its value. Good chemical management will give right first time. That means there will be less rework. That means there will be full value addition right at the beginning. This leads to, of course, better compliance. Better compliance means better satisfaction from the buyer satisfaction, customer satisfaction. Hopefully that should lead to more orders. Good chemical mapping and management also means better transparency, better traceability. Both these are criteria which are very relevant to sustainability, very important. And of course, all this leads to improved brand image. So I think all in all, if it is implemented, there may be a little bit of a cost in the beginning, because as you really streamline your chemicals, sometimes you may have to test them. Sometimes you may have to take multiple trials to arrive at the best case scenario. So of course, there will be some cost involved in the beginning, but I think it will be nullified as we go along. It shouldn't be in the long run.
great. So with this, I would like to go to the consulting side of the whole business. I mean, I would like to come to Yasir. I mean, Yasir, hi. I would like to understand from you, I mean, we are expecting more responsible consumption of apparel by consumers, which may force the brands and the manufacturers to look at a different business model in the coming days. So what changes are you expecting in the industry? Yasir.
Sure. See, there has been, a lot of changes which are already happening, and we have witnessed them in recent times. Apparel industry and textile industry, anyways, was very fast in terms of embracing the sustainable or sustainability requirements, even in the pre-COVID era, so to say. Now, what overall from a textile sector and the apparel sector, there are 3-4 things that we feel that, in the post-COVID era, I can't say it post, we're in the middle of it. Hopefully someday we'll be able to call it post, but there could be some changes which, most of us are looking at happening. So, the first one is about, the type of segment which is going to pick up, right? So the high fashion apparel segment, the designer segment and the likes will shift to most likely the more durable and utility based segment. So, the fashion segment is usually linked to the social interface that people have in events, parties, or perhaps in even daily lives. And where there is a will to show and desire to be appreciated for what you wear, with very few avenues to socially meet as a result of these COVID constraints, I think this segment is likely to contract a bit. The cost, obviously, I think so. The global economies are contracting. People have less money in their pockets. There's less money in the system. So I think the shift would be definitely for more cost-effective segments as opposed to, the high-end fashion and expensive fashion lines. Uh, Very interestingly, I think that has also some very direct sustainability bearing as well. The mode of shopping. So, from the traditional brick and mortar model where people would go and choose and probably try out, the online model of shopping is going to take center stage. So I can give you a small example, not specifically from the fashion and apparel sector, but I also, in my role as in PwC, happen to be the lead and relationship partner for one of the biggest home furnishing brands, a European brand, and we were having a discussion with them. So in this, in the last quarter in the quarter last year versus the same quarter this year, there was a drop of almost 80% in terms of the sales, for obvious reasons, because most of the stores are closed. The revenue drop is not proportionate, and they are basically approximately 45% of the revenue drop. So effectively, what this means is that most of the drop from the direct sales have been covered by the online channels. So I think this is going to be a much more consistent way of shopping in the days to come, and perhaps even beyond the post-COVID, when everything is hopefully sorted. Last point on this is on the sustainability side. And I think that is a very, very interesting development that we see, that in this era where everyone was really stretched to the hill, people were indoors, and there's a lot of grind mentally facing this challenge. There was just, if there is one positive fallout, I think it is around the development of the concern of the entire thing around sustainability. Because I think in the last few months we have, from a consulting side, been facing a lot more requests around sustainability and newer terms like net zero and carbon disclosure and all of that. So I think that's something that we feel that I think globally people have really managed to sit down, take a closer look at their lifestyles, and realize the importance of what sustainability has been. And now I think they're putting more and more attention and focus on sustainability. And I think this will certainly translate into a response from the side of the brands, because at the end, this is what the consumers are now hopefully look at it much more seriously. So I think the entire textile ecosystem globally will have a much more faster change towards sustainability and embracing sustainability than before. So I think in my two bits on how the shift is going to happen across the shift in the segment of the textile and apparel, the cost, the mode of shopping, and last but not the least, and quite important one at that, that there will be a much more concern and appreciation of the sustainability requirements, and consumers will be creating that push much more than ever before. So that's my two bits to it.
Thank you so much for giving us a view how the think tanks are looking at how consumers would behave in the future. With this, I would come to Ms. Linda. I have a question for you. We have a Sustainable Development Goal 2030. So I would like to understand from you how SDG 2030, and where all textile and apparel manufacturing countries are signatory to it. It's a global commitment. What role can be played by the private players in achieving the SDG 2030 goals?
Sure.
Over to you.
Thank you very much for your question. So I'm going to frame the answer around two things. Number one, SDG, so Sustainable Development Goals achievements, can't be split from financing of Sustainable Development Goals. And number two, what does it mean, this financing of sustainability in the new normal within the context of the COVID crisis? So when we think about, private companies, we think about, and we think about investments, there are two things that are always kind of driving that, right? If I'm an investor, what I would ask a company is like, do you manage your risk well? Do you have proper risk management? And can you see new market opportunities for growth? Now, I think sustainability and sustainability data does the same. If I have data around my social capital, if I have data around whether there is water or not available, if I have, all of this information, my ability to manage my company and to do proper risk management and to look at new markets is better. So I think what is unique about what's happening right now is, some of you mentioned already, clients are looking at more and better sustainability practices. Well, because of the crisis. Well, that's unique. This is the first crisis in history where investors and companies did not move away from sustainability compared to the past. And if you think about the fact that this is also the biggest crisis after the Wall Street crisis of 1929 in terms of the money that were lost around March, and the fact that yet investors did not move away from sustainability, I really think that these two keywords, risk management and new market opportunities, are what's bridging the gap between private sector practices and the achievement of sustainable development goals. And it's not just a hint that investors had around this. 90% of sustainable indexes in the past months outperformed their parent benchmark. These companies did better. And many of them did better because they, for example, those that have good management of their social capital, so attention to people, to employees, maybe even products that were catering properly to bottom of the pyramid customers, companies that were able, for example, to shift really quickly towards e-commerce, to produce in lean manufacturing, like smaller volumes rather than big bulks. All of those did a lot better in the crisis, were able to adapt better. They had better links to communities, even in terms of supply chain disruption. Which, in different ways, depending which market you're talking about, like Europe, of course, was very different from Bangladesh, or India, and etc. But still, that link between proper sustainability practices and agile ability to react to the crisis, I think it's the very first time that it makes complete sense from a social perspective, environmental perspective, business perspective, and the numbers kind of back it up. So I think the question here is how strong, how many companies are able to have those sustainability practices? How many companies do have that data to make those choices in that direction? Especially like I'm with UNDP in Bangladesh, so that's maybe the market that I know a little bit more, and the examples that come up speak to this context. And I think the challenge is a little bit of a disalignment of sustainability practices between sometimes buyers and suppliers. Buyers clearly, looked at these numbers, looked at the risk, even looked at the social crisis as kind of like a test of what could happen if, an environmental crisis, even, maybe longer, maybe more complex to manage, what would happen to their supply chain, to their production, to the way they market their products, etc. And all of these big buyers, they do that through also a very strong understanding of sustainability data, right? Because ultimately it does come down to that data to do risk management, to look at new markets, to look at different kinds of production, maybe lean productions versus big quantities. It's a bit different when it comes to suppliers, not because there isn't the awareness, but I think we heard it at the beginning of the call, this concept of, pilots never fail but don't scale. Well, that aspect of scale, it's really what's not there yet in terms of sustainability practices of suppliers sometimes. And even within the same company, there might be testing of some sustainability practices to maybe one factory, but not to all factories. So understanding the business sense, if there is no scale, not even within the same factory, is very difficult, especially because it's an industry that operates with very low liquidity. So any kind of investment to be made in bringing about these changes, it's really difficult to recover from. And clearly in the current context, different demand, different volumes that are going to be traded, that's going to make it even more difficult. And I think that's what should bring a reflection on the ecosystem, like why are they not scaling and what can this mean in the new normal in terms of partnerships that are built across stakeholders to maybe take this opportunity to actually finally have that scale, which we couldn't achieve before. Constraints to scale, I think we heard it also from other speakers, but from structural constraints, like sometimes factories are small and solar panels might not make sense if the rooftop surface is not big enough. To business model adaptation, there's a lot of talking OPEX, CAPEX, etc. But what would it take in terms of the ecosystem, the government, the guarantees that should go with the adaptation of these business models to make it work? Some ecosystem challenges in terms of the support, the legislation, the insurance, that certain practices will be in place. Even financing instruments, right? I mean, supply chain financing. Maybe this could be the time to really push it and creating equal responsibilities across all the different players. But of course, the regulatory environment does play a big role in terms of making sure that, for example, that financial tool is available. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, and this speaks of the work of UNDP as well. We're facilitating bringing together different kinds of stakeholders, right? On one hand, of course, private sector stakeholders, we work with buyers, we also work with suppliers on boosting sustainability management. So I think it's really important, it's management and not just reporting, because reporting, you can report on something you're doing on 10% of your premises, but sustainability management and going back to data, using that data to understand the risks, to understand the new business opportunities in the crisis. So how to link that with ecosystem players such as the government, understanding how it's really important to bring everybody around the same table, because we cannot talk of sustainable development goals without talking about financing of sustainable development goals. And sometimes it's just a matter of language, right? Of really understanding the two sides. I think now we're at the time where everybody says we should talk public and private, which wasn't the case a few years back. But the difference is how to talk with specific instruments, how to build the understanding of financial products, of anchor investments, of the need of, because it ultimately needs to go down to the details. I think now we're all on board with the principles. But so how to build that capacity so that the details can be not just tested, but new products can be found so that, things actually could get to scale.
I would like to go back to Mr. Nimkar. He talked about the chemical management, and he talked about that how chemical management can actually save cost. That's fantastic to know. Mr. Nimkar, actually our industry is also blamed as one of the most polluting industry, right? So if you can help us understanding what are the key steps so that we wash out that tag from us, that we are not the most polluting industry. And the other part of this question is, whose responsibility is it? Is it only with the manufacturers that they need to put or invest all the money from wherever they can source and make it clean? Or do you think that the responsibility with other stakeholders as well? Over to you, Mr. Nimkar.
Right, that's a very interesting question. Let's again quickly rewind a little bit and start from where I left off. Right, we realize the challenges that there is a need for cleaner production, and coming to the last few years again, that there are great initiatives that are happening. Now, these are happening at different levels because of two things. One is the medical research. Medical research finds out that there are problems and challenges with certain chemicals and certain things to the health of the people. Similarly, there are other organizations which find out that there are challenges to the environment, which is what we discussed. Now, both these things are then presented in media, they are presented to people, they are presented that these are some things are harmful to babies, some things are harmful to skin, some things are harmful to for different reasons. And then the consumers become aware of this. And when a last survey was done, almost 35% of the consumers said that they were concerned about the chemicals in the products that they buy. And this, I think, is growing now, because even in, say, in a country like ours in India, almost every alternate day, I see some article in the newspapers which are talking about problems in milk, toxicity in milk, pesticides on vegetables, and so on and so forth, and which is stimulating the Indian consumer as well. Now, over the years, we have been shipping things out to the West for baby wear, which I was testing 25 parameters on that, but not a single one was ever asked for a product that was sold in India. So does it mean that the Indian baby is not as important? No, probably not, because the Indian mother was not made aware of this. So sometimes the knowledge has not spread, information has not spread. So let's come back to the question. Where does this start? I think it first starts with a brand making a commitment internally. The senior management decides genuinely that we want to do something. And then, of course, it's the age of collaboration, age of cooperation. So you start with your tier 1 supplier. The tier 1 supplier then extends to the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 suppliers, because it's everybody in the supply chain that has to come together and have a similar philosophy to be able to make an end article which is sustainable. And as they say, the strength of a chain is only as much as the weakest link. So if you have even one defaulter in the entire thing, you still have a problem which is a failure. So every single person in the supply chain. So it's a uniform decision, and everybody has to come together. The second thing is to have a chemical strategy and a roadmap. Now, this has to be built with great care depending on your products, your production, the facilities that you have, the complexity of the supply chain, and then you build your manual, which is different for each company, each brand, and further down the supply chain. The third thing is that all these are new things. So there has to be an understanding or an evaluation. How much does my supply chain understand all this? So there has to be some methodology for evaluating. Once you identify the gap, then there has to be training, which is something that Werner touched upon, that GIZ has been doing. Training is, I think I cannot emphasize more, that training is required first with the brands themselves. I find many times that the documents made by the brands and published, very often the person who has signed that document is not fully aware. He's just copy pasted it from another brand. No, the understanding is not there. And then you have the tier 1 supplier, tier 2 supplier. Everybody must come on the same page. I don't want to mention one brand, but with them we actually did 350 internal trainings. So their staff and employees in 40 countries were trained first. The second level, we had training of 1,000 first tier supply chain. And we went down to chemical industry and finally to trims and accessory suppliers. So this is very important. When you identify the gaps and you upgrade them in their knowledge base. So once you have that knowledge base, then you know that, okay, everybody is now ready to implement. Then you need to appoint somebody. I think here I can take an example like Abhishek is the head of the sustainability and chemical initiatives at Arvind. It's important that there has to be an appointment of a person who is responsible. And this person then undergoes special training to go deeper down to understand everything from purchase to process to final product to production and discharge. And then, of course, once you've done all this and you've implemented, that's the time that you're ready for an internal audit. And then you go and audit at each level. Of course, the audit is not going to be 100% right. There would be gaps. So you identify the gaps. You have corrective action plans. You implement it. You have a time-bound program, maybe 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, depending on how big the company is. Re-evaluate the whole system. So you see if the gaps have been met with. If the gaps have been met, fine. Now you feel that the system is working. That's when now you come to the laboratory. You actually start having a test. So what do? You test your inputs, that the system is good for purchase, but are my inputs clean? The next is process. Is my process clean? The third is my product. Finally, is my product clean? And all my discharges. So which means you have got discharge into air, discharge into wastewater, discharge into sludge, whether all these are clean. And ideally, if everything is implemented correctly, you have a clean system. But that's not going to happen. There is going to be a failure. So then every failure you have, you do a root cause analysis. And with each root cause analysis, you identify the problem, rectify it, and over a period of time, you don't make that problem again. You don't make that mistake again. And hopefully, you gradually move. This is a continuous process. It's never going to end. It has to be built in the philosophy. And I think it's not a buyer or a supplier or any, it's everybody in the supply chain has to understand that it's their job. And this is due to pressures from the consumer, because ultimately we as consumers are really going to dictate the market. And of course, what we demand is going to ultimately become a law, or it's going to become a brand demand. So this is the whole holistic system by which how this can be implemented.
Thank you. Thank you for Mr. Namkat for your elaborate response. Now, what we have understood till now, one thing is for sure that the way the business is was happening before January or February of 2020, it will not remain same. And what we understand that the sustainability standards are also going through some of the changes. So I'd like to come to Abhishek. Abhishek, whatever indications you are getting from different brands about the changes in sustainability norms, standards, how do you think that it might impact the overall production cost in case of textiles and apparel?
Yeah, thanks, Arindam. So, I think what changes we have seen overall, like in short time period of last few months, or I would say in more general in last 2-3 years, are broadly three aspects. One is the action that is needed on climate change. So there's the level of urgency that has been seen now over last 1 to 3 years that has not been seen in the industry for last 10 years. So now people realize that we are probably running out of time in terms of working on reducing the impacts of climate change or reducing the GHG. So we've seen a lot of momentum even during these last 3-4 months, where brands are asking for a roadmap to transition away from coal or from any other fossil fuel and go for more and more renewable energy. That's number one. Second is, of course, Mr. Nimkar's subject, chemical management. So chemical management, again, has been becoming more and more a focus area where we've seen more broad-based action is being taken. So for last many years, it was restricted to few brands, maybe 10, 12 leading brands who were asking suppliers to go for chemical management. But now this action has become more broad-based. And third is related to the fibers itself. So there's a concern around microplastics, which has been elevated more and more, and people are now trying to look at how that can be dealt at the production level. And there is also of course some preliminary data which has come up, which says that the level of microplastic pollution even at the production stage is much higher than earlier anticipated, because microplastic problem was more discussed in context of emissions during consumer use. But the recent research is pointing out that emissions during the different manufacturing stages also, owing to high temperature and other strenuous applications. So I think broadly these three, and in addition, of course, the older one or all the previous measures are also gaining more strength. And if you see each of these three, they definitely require investment, and also technically challenging beyond a point. So as Linda also mentioned, that renewable energy has a constraint that you cannot do more rooftop than of course roof area available to you. And if government policy doesn't support you buying renewable from third party purchase, which is Specifically, we have seen a case in India and many other South Asian countries where government is not willing to facilitate this third-party trade of renewable energy. So how does one do it? So there's a technical challenge as well as investment challenge. So in that context, supplier finance, which was also discussed, becomes very important. That how you provide suppliers access to long-term and cheaper capital to undertake these initiatives. Chemical management, perhaps in our experience, and also as Mr. Nimkar pointed out, if done rightly, you can save the cost in the long term. Initially, you do have to invest firstly so in the right people, because textile industry has chemists since ages, and they are necessary team members, but they are mostly skilled or concerned about the production aspects, whether their production would have right recipe or not. But the knowledge on chemical management from sustainability viewpoint is lacking. So that's one investment that one needs to make. And microplastic is still a very evolving science. So even I would say at country level or in the technical consultancy field, that's a relatively new subject, and the knowledge is mostly with the universities and the researchers who have been working on it for significant 5, 10, 15 years. So each of these does lead to result in production cost. And I think especially when it comes to more environmental initiatives, the discussion do need to shift to incentives and to pricing of the products, because as long as it was like social compliance, health and safety, I think those are like land of the laws also, and one needs to respect and follow as a manufacturer, and we can't sort of shift the responsibility of implementing those to the customers or to anyone else. It's the responsibility of the suppliers. But when it comes to some of these longer term investments into environmental issues, so you need, first of all, access to capital, long-term business commitments, and some kind of incentive. I'm not saying that you go and increase the cost of a jean or a t-shirt, but there are a lot of other fiscal and non-fiscal incentives which would promote a wider supply chain action.
I would like to again come back to Yasir. He made very few important points on how consumers are going to behave in the future. So, Yasir, I have one more question for you at this moment. That is, as a responsible business advisory lead, you are working across the industries, even across the countries. Yeah. What learnings this industry can have from our industry to be more sustainable?
It's a very pertinent question because in any sector that we work, we should try and pick up learnings from a sector and try and replicate those learnings to the sector that we are working on, because it's not at all times that we need to reinvent the wheel. It's also important to keep an eye on the fact that where globally we are headed to in terms of sustainability and all, right? So I'll just give you a few perspectives about the terms that are gaining more and more attention these days. And I'm not specifically talking about the textile and apparel sector, but quite a few of them are replicable on this sector. So, there are certain terms like, for example, traceability. So traceability is something which is certainly, if you ask me, originated from the textile sector. And more and more companies are, if you see, getting serious about the establishing the chain of command, right from the farm level to the consumer, and then thereby even at a landfill site level. So across the value chain, the need for tracing the product as well as the used product, because that is also emancipating, is gaining more and more attention. Second is on the circularity side, where again very pertinent to the textile sector, but again is applicable on the other sectors as well. For textile, if you see from an EU perspective, a number of mandates have been rolled out in terms of commitments and frameworks which have been rolled out. A lot of companies and brands are signing up to that. So I think that is something that we feel is going to come a big time as a requirement around the textile sector as well, with its bearing on the textile and apparel sector. We personally have undertaken quite a few assignments, specifically in case of Bangladesh, where we did a strategic assignment on how do we convert the PET plastic bottle waste into and recycle that into a rayon fiber to be used in the polyester manufacturing. So that was a project that we did along with a multilateral plus the government of Bangladesh. We have done it in India. We have done it, for pre and post consumer textile waste, and in several other countries. So that is something that, along with a slew of regulations that have come by, especially in this part of the world, on the plastic waste management, on the other waste related aspects, I think that is all set to gain more and more momentum as a solution, which I think the entire textile ecosystem needs to be mindful of. We have, a lot of queries coming in, and I'm speaking strictly from, the consulting hat that we wear in terms of advising the companies to become more sustainable and, more future-proof, so to say, on the climate risk assessment and this entire net zero concept. So I'll just give a small example of this, that globally, PwC has been very closely involved with Microsoft, which has come out with a net zero coalition, wherein there are 6 or 7 very big global companies who have signed up to this concept of net zero. And as soon as they launched that, PwC globally has been involved in getting the entire structure and the contours in place for Microsoft. Microsoft being the flag bearer of this initiative. But you have companies like Unilevers, and in India, big IT companies like Wipro and so forth signing up to that. Soon after that, you see similar, I would say, commitments being made by the likes of Apple and the Amazons of the world. So I think that is something that entire climate and net zero concept is also kind of floating in, and I should say that quite fast as well. Sustainable packaging, which is again a part of circularity and plastic waste management. I think that is also gaining a lot of focus now. TCFD, which is on the carbon disclosure side, that also is coming big way. And I'll just give you an example that last year, when we were allowed to travel, so the good old times, we were having a meet in Lisbon, along with the WBCSD, which is the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and it has all the top companies as its signatories and its members. So we had Peter Becker, who was the CEO of WBCSD, and he was sharing with us that for all the signatory companies to WBCSD, and mind you, they're all the biggies of the world, he has made it mandatory, or WBCSD has made it mandatory, that in order to retain your membership, you will have to go and disclose on the TCFD platform or the TCFD framework, which is on your carbon disclosure or your carbon impacts. So that's the kind of heft, or should I say the push, which is being given to these line items. And then we have something on this entire ESG area. I'm sure all of us are reading quite a lot about how more and more funding agencies, the private equity firms, the banks, all of them are getting signatory to this concept of ESG. So whether it's in the form of a UNPRI or otherwise, the entire concept of impact investment. So we run a specific service called responsible investments, and I can tell you that that's growing so fast because globally more and more sustainability related aspects are moving closer to the capital markets, and it is becoming essential to raise fund and to kind of apply for funding, and you have to demonstrate those ESG criteria as well. So with those some practical I would say examples, I would also want to pick up this point, which was alluded to by many of my fellow panel members. Is it the responsibility of only the, should I say, the company or the supplier to invest to become sustainable? So a few quick examples that I can give is that it has been the need for developing an ecosystem for the suppliers to become compliant to this has been felt for quite some time, because not all the suppliers would have that kind of could run their business with that kind of margins to be able to afford these changes with respect to performing well on the sustainability aspects. So I think so, just as a small example, in the entire industrial development, in India, we have for a very, very big industrial corridor that is being developed, we help make the green corridor framework for that industrial development. And that basically refers to how much can the government, how much can the industry associations, and how much can the industry, specific industry themselves, can join hands together and co-create a sustainable ecosystem, so that it does not pinch an individual industry in its journey to become more sustainable, but it is basically the pain and the gain is co-shared by the larger set of population. So those terms is not only in India. There's something that we have been working on, a green competitiveness IP, which is industrial park in a different part of the world, where again we are trying to identify that how can at an industrial park level or at an industrial corridor level, what are those things that can be provided for the industries who are housed there, to help them get into the sustainable journey without having to feel the pinch of the funding and going all by themselves. So these are a few points that I would be really keen to put across, that way forward some of the I would say new concepts which are being discussed at different sectors level, and how some of the initiatives that from an industrial park or an industrial corridor level are being devised to cater to this demand for sustainability or going sustainable. Because I think one thing is fairly clear, that hereafter there is no business without being sustainable. So there are two bits from my side. Over to you, Arindam.
Yeah, thanks, Yasir. Thanks for all those examples, but also it put a challenge to the textile industry, that how they can actually adopt that kind of examples. And I believe we need to be much more innovative in our processes. So with this, I will come to Linda. And my question to Linda is that UNDP has actually, always inspired the industry to be more innovative. You have identified many practices which are innovative in nature, and you have actually looked at that how that can be scaled up. I personally is fortunate enough to work one such project with you. So I'd like to understand from you what is the plan of UNDP for the South Asian, textile and apparel business to look for more innovation and to work closely with private sector. Over to you, Linda.
Thank you, Arindam. A very simple question. So I think for now, I'll just speak of an initiative that started before COVID, and that now we are retailoring a little bit, considering the current situation. So before the crisis, we had 2 MOUs, and we kind of brought 2 organizations together as a connector. One memorandum of understanding is with GRI, Global Reporting Initiative. I'm sure you're all quite familiar with their sustainability standards and their practices. And the other memorandum of understanding is with BGMEA, which in Bangladesh is the Association for Garment Exporters and Manufacturers. Now, we kind of connected the dots in terms of the need for the request to improve in terms of sustainability reporting. And I know there are many initiatives. It's not just UNDP, also other partners that are trying to build that capacity in Bangladesh, factories to, leading organization in terms of sustainability standards to see how could we, tell a story of scale. Because also in terms of, building those dialogues and understandings that we heard about from, also others, for example, with the government, one of the questions is, what is the current impact on sustainable development goals of the industry? And any kind of negotiation, any kind of support of where is there more help needed? Not every area might be a venue for public-private cooperation, but if the goals are aligned, those changes can be done together. So the idea there before the crisis was, can we have this concept of SDG factories and really being able to tell the story of how the industry is impacting across the different development goals. We did a similar exercise with GRI quite successfully in Colombia. In that case, it wasn't apparel alone, it was across different industries. And that report became part of an annex of the Volunteer National Report, which is a report that governments present in front of the General Assembly. And it was the first time that private sector was part of that report globally, right? So that partnership was quite successful, and discussing of the implications that can have for ecosystem transformation and the importance of the apparel industry in Bangladesh specifically. That's kind of the journey that we started. Of course, the crisis happened, and priorities for factories in terms of needing to dedicate time to manage the crisis happened. So we kind of had to put a little bit on hold the process for a few months, and now we're restarting. Now I don't know exactly what the story the data will tell, right? But I would just like to share with you a few reflections that we had now that we are restarting the process in conversations with lead champion factories and relevant stakeholders. Some of the conversations were around will there be a different story if we look at the data for 2020? Will there be maybe like a less progress? Will the story be not as convincing? And ultimately, I think what emerged, which was really encouraging, is I think there is a growing understanding that sustainability data is not about telling a good story, right? It's not about telling the good picture and all the good things and all the water treatment plants and the how employees are being supported. I mean, that of course is part of it, but it's really about materiality, like understanding what's the most relevant sustainability aspect to look at that makes sense for those stakeholders, that makes sense for the people, that makes sense for the environment. It's also about telling the story of the negative things. Like there are some things and some impact that is embedded in every industry. There is a negative impact, but the point is, how can I also show that I have a plan, but I understand all the different aspects and that I'm having a plan that goes beyond 1 year, because all of this requires investments. We heard it before, building the business case, etc. And so I think what's really encouraging is how we're really having that very open conversation of looking at the positive, looking at the negative, looking at the crisis, right? And really starting to push all of this conversation towards a stronger materiality conversation. What's really important? We don't have to look at every aspect of sustainability, but we need to have awareness about all the aspects and understanding which ones to start with. And some, of course, at the end of the process, some of the reflection, and this links to the work that we've done before with PwC as part of a project with HSBC, it was really like looking at the financial drivers behind sustainability in different forms and how they're changing. But again, I would really like to emphasize, because I think that's what we were scared of at the beginning. How do we go back to factories and tell them that maybe some of the stories might not be as pretty right now, right? But I really think that pushing that understanding that data is data. It's not a and that showing better planning builds confidence with investors, with buyers. So it's all about the data and the planning and having having shared objectives, but not necessarily about only the things that are working, but also those that are not working yet, and how together we can work for them.
Thanks, Leonor. Thanks. So we have come to the almost last part of our this meeting, and we actually floated a advertisement material in our LinkedIn profile through our social media, and we have received quite a few interesting questions from industry. So what we have done, we have picked up two questions from those, and I am going to now place those questions, and these are all from the industry. So the first question is to Werner. Werner, to you, the question which has been thrown by one of the industry representative is, he mentioned first about the low productivity, low efficiency of the apparel manufacturing sector of India and Bangladesh. Even though the wage rate is low, but it's not the full story because the efficiency is low also. And he believes that it is more in the mentality. It's not because of the labors. It is in the mentality of the owners that they don't want to drive the training of the workers. They want the worker to give the productivity from day one. Now, as GIZ is implementing many capacity development projects in this part of the world for the textile and apparel industry, I would like to understand from you, what are the major challenges GIZ is facing when you are actually implementing those projects? Werner, to you.
Yeah, let me give you two examples. One of our projects in collaboration with ILO is to introduce an employer's injury protection scheme to Bangladesh. The exporting manufacturers have to deduct 0.03% from the export value. Many people have difficulties to calculate what this really means. What is 0.03? To make it simple, the equivalent value, the gap of financing such kind of system is the value of one t-shirt per man and women per year. One t-shirt. And when you discuss this with manufacturers and with buyers, they tell you this will kill us. So since 4 years, we have no progress, no consent on doing it. 4 million workers times the price for a simple t-shirt. 6 million per year from an industry exporting for almost 40 billion. This is really disappointing, and I must say it's somehow ridiculous. And that's a question of moral and ethics. And I mean, in each religion we have kind of commandments. And if this doesn't help, and I mean, if such kind of behavior is not a crime, what is it? And everywhere in our life, we define certain behavior as a crime. And I think violating the idea of sustainability, unless it becomes a crime, we will have lots of space for discussion. I think the solutions are available. Second example, which is pointing in the same direction. We are training, for example, ergonomics in factories. The right sitting in front of a sewing machine. And we can prove that this is also improving two things. One is the health of workers, and the second is productivity. So we have entrepreneurs who value this approach and say, okay, let's do a training in my factory. And we have others who say, if my worker is done, I take another one. we have sufficient in our country. So I come back to my point at the beginning. We as a development organization have to enter more the meso and macro level, and it needs more regulation in terms of violating sustainability is a crime. And Yazir said, there is no business without sustainable. I would turn it around. There is no sustainability without business. But the frame which describes what is a crime and what not has to be defined more precisely. I mean, of course, we have the SDGs. We have this common sense of what is right or wrong, but it needs regulation. Again, these two examples, if we still allow to happen this, then we have still a lot to do.
Right, Werner. I agree with you. I agree with you fully. Thanks for your response. So now the last question, and I like the language of the question. So if you allow, I will read it out for all you guys. So this question is to the manufacturers. Every year, the sustainability standards of brands and buyers are becoming stricter and thus difficult to achieve. But on the other side, most of the buyers are not ready to increase the price. How long can the manufacturers keep on taking this margin pressure? What to do?
Sure, Arindam, that's a very pertinent question, and I think we have had discussion around this. Werner has also shared some views, and so has Linda. But see, the key point of view, and I fully agree with Werner, everything and everything related to the social responsibility of workers, that is something that a manufacturer should own up to, whether it is related to health and safety, payment of proper wages, overtime, and trainings, etc. So I think that is something. If it was or it is not there in the facility, we should all implement and pass on whatever the cost is to the product, and that can only happen once we have this implemented uniformly across the industry. But at the environmental level, I fully agree, and I can relate to this that there are a lot of investments needed, and these new requirements are coming in. Like I said, renewable energy, chemical management, having a trained and qualified workforce, and there's no question of increasing the product price of the product. And ironically, I would just probably mention what one of my industry colleague quoted, that if we implement too many of these sustainability measures, brands will not buy from us because we will become too expensive for them to afford us. So that has happened in the past. In fact, there have been cases where specific factories have been built as per the brand standards and brand requirements. But then the same brand finds it too expensive to source from there. So it's a conversation, and we've also seen a shift or a few cents difference. Brands would not hesitate to shift their entire sourcing from one country to another. And we are seeing whenever a country becomes a more expensive destination to source from, you look out for new countries. So there's a movement already which is happening from this part of the world to Africa or to newer countries within Asia like Myanmar, because they're seen as cheaper destinations, and the destinations where your tax-free status is given to be lasted longer. So I think these are the very, very difficult. I fully agree to this question and can relate to this. But I think to give a short solution or a short answer is very difficult to this, and that's where only collective action can help. And again, there are only two things that can perhaps help us make enough progress. One is if there is a strict regulation and enforcement of the regulation in the manufacturing countries or in the purchasing countries, where you make it as a due diligence requirement that what are the standards that are needed. And second is a fiscal incentive. If there's no, if customers can give fiscal incentives to the supply chain, I think supply chain is willing to go to any extent to implement the measures as well as then gain more business as a result. But yeah, it would, some of these requirements which are there now would not come for free, especially which goes way beyond compliance.
Yeah. No. Werner, you wanted to comment something.
Yeah, I think this control loop of price, offer and demand, reducing cost, I think is a very efficient mechanism. And of course, economy proves and private sector proves every day how to make use of this mechanism. But as I said, it needs a defined framework, regulated frame. Otherwise, we are supporting free riders, those ones who are violating the rules. So, for example, if you look to these initiatives of Accord and Alliance in improving the building safety and safety of electricity in these buildings, this was a kind of level playing field. All relevant brands participated, and the threat to all was, if you don't follow, you're out of the business. So when business is going to be, let's say, extinguished if you violate compliance, then everybody very quickly follows. Very easy, and the techniques and the solutions are everywhere available. So regulation must not always come from governments. It can be also self-control, self-commitments of the private sector. But this includes to accept that the free riders will be kicked out of the market. And of course, if these free riders are your subcontractors or whatever they are, at the end of the day, it's a question of clear commitment to SDGs and to compliance, yes or no. The solutions are available, and we know all how to behave. And I think it doesn't help to blame always those ones who are asking for better prices. I mean, all of us as human beings, we behave in the same way. When I'm looking for a ticket, I'm checking which airline is the cheapest, where do I have the best flight connection. Price is something which guides all of us. As I said, becomes a crime, and this line has to be defined more strict and has to be more regulated. That's my conviction.
Thanks, Werner, for the comment. So I'll just request a final set of very short comment from all the panelists. So we have understood the points from Werner, Abhishek. So Linda, any final comment from your side, whatever you have heard today from all the panelists? Any final comment?
More than a comment, I guess a wish. I think, throughout the crisis, the social capital aspect, got really highlighted, and I think, measures were taken, and there's a lot of attention there in terms of also public-private partnerships, enabling environment, etc. But I just hope that, the process will continue looking at all the different aspects of sustainability, including environment, despite right now there is lots of pressure and a lot of the incentives are for the social capital aspect, because the biggest learning we got is, everybody thought this was the year of environment. It came out and eventually turned out to be the year of the social capital instead. And the biggest learning is sustainability is really key to overcome any kind of crisis, and we, most likely will have others to come. So I hope we'll not forget, all that ESG comes together as a package. And that's really important to look at all the different aspects together and not just the one that is, hottest because of what's happening at the moment. So I hope the industry will really look at environmental, social, and governance as ones moving forward.
Thanks. Yasir, from you, any final comment?
Sure. So I think just as a final conclusive note, for someone like me who has been into the sustainability consulting space for more than a decade and a half, I think it is very heartening to see how sustainability and the ESG and the climate related aspects are being now really taken seriously, so much so that we are now kind of almost bordering on terming it as a crime as to not really following the sustainability norms. I think there will be some teething problems, as you know, we've been discussing, you know, on the cost side and the skill side and all of that. But I'm pretty sure and confident that much sooner than what we expect, we will overcome these challenges, because there is no other way. As you know, one of the brands, I was looking at the sustainability statement. They say that Plan A, right, which effectively means that there's no Plan B. So I think it is very, very apt in the sustainability parlance that this is the only planet we have, and there is no Plan B, and effectively no Planet B. So I've seen the trend from the last 15 years. It has come to this point, which as a sustainability professional, I find very encouraging. Some challenges will be there, but I'm pretty sure that as much as the challenges are there, there are also successful examples. Werner was terming this example of when I go and I will look at the cheapest ticket. Absolutely, sustainability should not be carrying that premium tag of because you're good you have to pay higher. Let's not try and expect that from the consumers. I think we have some very, very good and lively examples. I'll just share a small one before I conclude. uh, Ikea, when they started looking at, they used to sell the bulbs which were based on the high energy intensity bulb that was 10-15 years back. They moved to those LED, but the way they moved the LEDs was that they priced the LEDs, which are very highly energy efficient, at the same price point as the CFLs or the earlier technology versions of those electric bulbs. For a few months, because I've been working very closely with IKEA for a decade and a half, for a few months they kept both at the shelf of IKEA store. The CFL died a natural death because of the fact that why would anyone, if it is priced similarly, why would not anyone pick up an LED which has a 3x more life and 5x more energy efficient and all, and price competitively? And in that case, I just want to reiterate the ethos that the sustainability leader for IKEA mentioned to me. We don't want to test our consumers' commitment to sustainability. We want to give them something which is sustainable at the most compelling and competitive cost. I know that's one of our example. In all the sectors, in every example, this might not fit in, but it's a very good template that, on a conclusive note, we can refer to, and that's the direction I really hope and expect that we take in this aspect. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Yasir. Mr. Nimkar, from you, the concluding remarks, and then I'll ask Dibodha for the concluding remarks from his side. Over to you, Mr. Nimkar, first.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the next coming decade, where I see things going. There are two aspects which will be in the mainframe. One is, of course, recycling of textiles. And of course, a lot is being discussed about circularity and what will be done. But on the ground level, in reality, it is only a single figure digit. I think anyone can debate between 1% and 9% or so, but it's very, very low. So what is happening is that close to 50 billion kilograms of clothing is ending up in a landfill. So the next thing that I feel which will become very, very relevant, and nobody has given a thought to this as yet, is what happens at the end of life in the landfill. So we are looking at I'm again looking at it from a chemical management point of view. We have almost zero knowledge, even at industry level or at university level, what happens at the end of life. So preliminary studies have started in different universities, so on. But I think this will become mainframe very soon. It's probably in the next decade as we are looking at. These two chemical aspects will become new challenges. And of course, we'll be looking for new solutions.
Thanks, Mr. Nimkar. Over to you, Dibodha, for the closing remarks.
Yeah, it has been a very, very interesting discussion. I'm really, really very happy to be here and happy to host every one of our STEAM panelists here today and discussing various aspects of this sustainability business, the challenges and the future, everything. So Textile Excellence and PwC would like to have you all again for such a discussion in the future. And we'd also like to add value to you for any such projects on sustainability or into the value chain, if we could add any value to your efforts as well. Thank you.